Afternoon, Facebook. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. It is 12:53 Pacific Daylight Time, and off we go. First thing, today is the 7-year anniversary of my arrival in Washington State to start my life over. It was a 3-day drive, which began on April 12th. I drove all the way through the 13th and then arrived on the afternoon of April 14th, 7 years ago today. So it's kind of a big deal. Everything is still new to me out here. I can't describe. Sometimes I'll be driving down the highway and I'll come around a bend and unexpectedly catch a glimpse of Mount Rainier that I wasn't prepared for, and I'll catch my breath. It still startles and amazes me how huge that mountain is. And there are so many other things about the natural beauty of Washington State, of which I could say the exact same thing. I haven't got to a point where I take it for granted yet. And I was hanging out with some friends of mine last night, and they were playfully jabbing at me for having a sort of childlike wonder about things like that, and my willingness to drive 3 hours out of town just to get a good view of the mountains or something. And yeah, they're absolutely right about that. So maybe I'm fortunate in that I never tire of seeing things like that. And there are also people I've met who've lived here in the Pacific Northwest all their lives and who will say the same thing about seeing Mount Rainier and just being awestruck, even after having spent their entire lives growing up around it. So I feel blessed and fortunate to live in a place that offers such unparalleled natural splendor. It's really amazing, and I'm grateful to live here. And 7 years today, 7 years to the day, I have been living in Washington State, and it has been an absolute adventure. And I love adventures. What can I say? So, on to the news of the day. I've got the latest coronavirus figures. As I've commented a number of times, it has become something of a grim ritual that I do this, but I find it important to maintain a consistent perspective on this. It is a historical world event and very unique also. So, as of today, worldwide, there are nearly 2 million cases, 1,983,006 positive or confirmed cases of COVID 19. And there have been 125,093 deaths from COVID 19 to date. Now, that's 1/8 of a million, 125,000. That's a pretty big number worldwide. It still doesn't match the numbers of things like the Spanish flu, which I believe we encountered 102 years ago, if I'm not mistaken about that, but it's still a very significant number. 125,093 deaths worldwide. Here in the United States, we are looking at a figure of 603,496 positive or confirmed cases as of today. And our country has lost 25,195 lives. And we remain the country who has experienced the highest death toll, not the highest mortality rate, but the highest cumulative overall death toll, surpassing Italy. Italy is currently sitting at 21,067 fatalities out of a total of 162,488 positive or confirmed cases. Examining figures more locally, here within the United States, New York, 202,208 positive or confirmed cases, and in the state of New York alone, 10,834 COVID-related deaths. In the state of Washington, we have 10,703. So the state of New York has experienced more people losing their lives to the coronavirus than the state of Washington has positive or confirmed cases. Our state has lost 523 people due to this pandemic. but the state of New York has a number of people who've died from this, which is higher than the total number of cases that we have all across Washington state. That is a very sobering way of looking at this. I sometimes when I'm standing here doing this and reading out these numbers, I almost catch myself being a little too dispassionate, a little too clinical, just reading off numbers as though they don't actually represent human lives. And I've got to check myself about this because I don't want to become so callous that I lose the perspective of what this really means for people and for people's lives and for people's loved ones. It really is an incredibly it's surreal what's happening. It's surreal, and I don't think I have the vocabulary to adequately express the effect that this is having on the way that I look at my own life and the lives of the people I care about, and how much it's inspired me to express my appreciation for the people in my life whom I hold dear. So, as I stand here reading off these numbers, I want to make sure that I articulate, at least as best as I'm able to, the human element of this and what it really means. So I haven't gone and zoomed in to look at county by county figures in the state of Washington. I don't see much of a point really at this time. I think it's going to be the same. King County is the worst, followed by Snohomish, followed by Pierce, and then the rest of them further down the list. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that while I was looking at sort of an interactive map of all the counties in Washington on our state's Department of Health website, that there's one county, I think somewhere in southeastern Washington, that has no cases and no fatalities at all. I'll have to, if I remember to, I'll have to go back and find which state, or rather which county that is here in Washington state. Now, I've been keeping an eye, as I'm sure many of you also have been, on the unemployment situation. Ever since, I want to say it was the 23rd or the 25th of March when H.R. 748 was signed into law, we've been talking about how every single unemployment payment that we receive is going to be augmented with the addition of additional $600 every week. And I remember commenting when I first heard about that that had to have been some kind of a typo, because that's an enormous sum of money to just be sending out to people. Not that I mind, really. There's some reservations, I suppose, on a moral level that I have about it, but hell, take the money and run, right? But so far, that has yet to materialize. And I keep hearing people say, oh, it's going to begin this week, or oh, it's starting on this date, and oh, our state is dealing with decades-old computer systems that are not equipped to handle what's going on, and the White House commenting that they wish this additional $600 weekly could go straight from the federal government to the individual citizen, but rather it got routed through the state systems and then dispersed from there to the individual citizen. So there's been a lot of talk about it, and as of my most recent unemployment payment to me, it has not yet begun to include that money. So this is a story which is, well, this is just from, I don't have a date for this story, unfortunately, but this is from KATU.com, which is a local network here in the state of Washington. The headline: Washington state unemployment checks to start rolling in around April 18th, so 4 days from now. Washington residents can expect to see their unemployment checks around April 18th, according to the state's Employment Security Department. For the third week in a row, new unemployment claims in Washington state surged as the coronavirus pandemic affected hundreds of thousands of jobs. Nationwide, nearly 10 million people have applied for unemployment benefits because of business shutdowns from the virus. Quote, we are targeting April 18th for our go-live date for the technology that will allow people to receive the $600 enhancement, ESD said in a statement on Friday. In the past 3 weeks, at least 480,730 new employment claims have been filed in Washington, dwarfing the number filed during the peak weeks of the 2008-2009 recession. Before the coronavirus outbreak and the statewide stay-home order, roughly 6,000 to 8,000 new claims were filed on average each week in January and February. So obviously that system is being just overwhelmed. At least 480,730 new employment claims have been filed in Washington within the past 3 weeks alone. So coworkers of mine who communicate in a mass group text message have been asking each other questions about what's going on with the unemployment. With the unprecedented volume of people applying for benefits, nearly 500,000 in the last 3 weeks alone, the individual questions, such as the ones that I have submitted because I was confused about various minutiae and details, I don't expect ever to receive an answer to them. And if there were any mistakes made in the filing of things or in trying to make sure you're doing this right and that you don't end up having to pay any money back when this is all over, nearly 500,000 new claims in the last 3 weeks alone. It could take them years to sift through all of that and to get to all the various potential mistakes and overpayments. I don't anticipate that they're going to have across the board success in looking at these things and resolving everything. So I'm going to proceed with caution and make sure at least that I'm being as transparent as I can in what I report to them. But give them a break. Nearly 500,000 new cases in the last 3 weeks alone. And according to their website, as being reported by KATU.com, in about 4 days, they should have their system up and going. So my expectation is that as of next week, we can start seeing payments, including the retroactive payments of the additional monies promised under federal law. Now, I've commented a number of times the way that this virus has affected the government from the federal to the state to the local, all the way on down. The amount of raw power that's now in the hands of people in terms of the way that our personal lives can proceed is unprecedented. And I rather jokingly made a reference to Star Wars. You know that scene in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith where Anakin and Palpatine are sitting watching the opera, and Palpatine says, all those who gain power are afraid to lose it. Well, there may be some truth to that in human terms. When people all of a sudden have a taste of power, they're not going to relinquish it easily, even if they're being motivated by the very best of intentions, which I'd like to believe our local and state leadership is. But there have been some examples nationwide of people whose reaction to this new dose of authority has been troublesome. And I have come across a story in thefederalist.com, and this is just from yesterday. And I'm just going to begin reading from it. The headline being, "The coronavirus is exposing little tyrants all over the country." There's nothing like a crisis to bring clarity. The response of some mayors and governors to the coronavirus pandemic in recent days has made it clear they think they have unlimited and arbitrary power over their fellow citizens, that they can order them to do or not to do just about anything under the guise of protecting public health. We've now witnessed local and state governments issue decrees about what people can and cannot buy in stores, arrest parents playing with their children in public parks, yank people off public buses at random, remove basketball rims along with private property, ticket churchgoers, and in one case try and fail to chase down a lone runner on an empty beach. All of this, we're told, is for our own good. The most egregious example of this outpouring of authoritarianism was an attempt by Louisville, Kentucky Mayor Greg Fisher to ban drive-in church services on Easter. On Holy Thursday, one day before Christians were to begin their most important religious celebrations of the year, Fisher declared that drive-in Easter services would be illegal. Now, okay, social distancing, trying to slow the spread of a virus. People are driving into a parking lot and staying within their vehicles. How close we're talking about social distancing being mandatory 6 feet between people. I'm just curious, is it possible for any two human beings seated in separate cars to be closer than 6 feet together? I I suppose if you got the cars absurdly close together or played some weird parking lot version of Tetris, you might achieve that very unlikely feat, but I don't think so. So just the very idea that to arrive in your vehicle and stay within your vehicle at a drive-in church service is in some way a violation of social distancing does not pass the smell checks to me. To remove all doubt about his seriousness, he also threatened arrest and criminal penalties for anyone who dared violate his order, and in an Orwellian twist, invited people to snitch on their fellow citizens. Fisher justified this by saying it was to save lives. Thankfully, a federal judge made short work of the mayor's idiotic power grab, issuing a temporary restraining order against the city of Louisville on Saturday, writing so as to remove all doubt, quote, the mayor's decision is stunning, and it is, beyond all reason, unconstitutional. There are other examples of this all across the country. I'm just going to take a moment to glance over the rest of this. A lot of this is focusing on how people of the Christian faith seem to be targeted a little more extraordinarily, but that just could be because of services over the Easter holiday. I'm not really too sure about that. Let's see, something about a fruit and vegetable ban in Michigan. Let's see here. Targeting of churches, while undoubtedly the most offensive overreach by state and local governments, is hardly the only instance of government gone wild. In Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who has been referred to amusingly as Half Whitmer, that's funny, I don't care who you are, that's funny, has taken it upon herself to declare what items are and are not essential, dictating to grocery stores what they can and cannot sell as part of a sweeping order issued Friday. Among the non-essential and therefore banned items are fruit and vegetable plants and seeds. Never mind that growing fruits and vegetables at home right now would help maintain social distancing during the pandemic. The governor has spoken her word, and her word is law. Beyond the fruit and vegetable ban, the governor's order is an object lesson in the absurdity and inconsistency of arbitrary power and rule by fiat. Michiganders are banned from traveling between residences if they own a cottage or a summer home, but the ban only applies to Michigan residents. And so an out-of-stater with a cottage in the Upper Peninsula could presumably still visit. Well, this just goes on, and there are many other examples everywhere you look across the country. I've said a number of times in a number of situations throughout my life that if you put authority in the hands of somebody who doesn't know how to handle it, it's not a matter of if that authority will be abused. It's just a matter of how badly. So, now, I've also tried to make my best effort to continue to watch the response to all this from the White House. The amount of attention that's being drawn to it. I understand that the ratings, the television ratings for these daily press availabilities at the White House are up among the highest for any type of television broadcast there have ever been. I watched a little bit of one last night where essentially the president took aim at some of his more fierce media critics, and essentially his method in so doing was to take their own reporting and turn it back on them. Always they are trying to push the narrative that whatever method the president or his advisors have taken towards combating this virus is something that has to be portrayed in the absolute worst light possible. And they seem to do this, their attention span towards their own reporting seems to be embarrassingly short. They have selective amnesia. And so the president was rather easily and rather effortlessly, I should say, able to take their own reporting and turn it back around on them to show them examples of the very things they were reporting at the very beginning of this with respect to saying, oh, don't worry about this, America. This is not going to be some apocalyptic plague. There's really no reason why you can't just relax, put this out of your minds, and get on with your daily lives. But then, of course, as soon as things began to turn, then they had to end up eating their own words. And the response by the press corps who were seated in the room was nothing short of a meltdown. From my point of view, I watched the whole thing. The reporters sitting in that room acted in such violent defensiveness. They acted as though they had been personally attacked. They were outraged. They were indignant. And it continued on into today when the president sat surrounded at a table in his cabinet room, I'm pretty sure, by people who had contracted COVID-19 and then recovered. And there was probably 6 or 7 such examples. And then at the very end of it, one of the reporters, Paula Reed, I think her name is, as the press corps was being ushered out of the room, started asking snarky questions of the coronavirus survivors who were seated around this table. The question she was asking was, do you guys honestly think that you're immune to this? Why did you take the risk? Why did you travel so far? Do you think you're immune to coronavirus? And she was just abruptly ushered out of the room because it was so tasteless and so tactless. I don't care what your political persuasion is. Tactics like that are disgraceful. They are not about speaking truth to power. They are simply about fighting. I don't like this mentality that, well, there's good guys and there are bad guys. And if you're not on my team, you're a bad guy. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like having to automatically, reflexively oppose everything a public figure does just because you've decided they're not on your team. So every single thing they do has to be attacked, and attacked in such petty terms as what this reporter Paula Reed, I want to say her name is. It was embarrassing to watch sitting here in my apartment. It was kind of disgraceful. But on that vein, one of the members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force is this Dr. Anthony Fauci. There's been some drama in the news lately because while he was on the Sunday morning circuit this past weekend doing his interviews, he made a comment that was easy to twist into something opposing something uttered by the president. And so they were trying to portray a growing rift between the president and one of his top medical advisors. My suspicion is that the media who are interviewing Dr. Fauci want to try to maneuver him into the position of saying something which insults the president and which undermines the president's credibility. And they've been at this game for some time. And my attention was first alerted to this possibility when I noticed that there was a petition online to have Dr. Fauci nominated as People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. I've got, believe I actually have a news story about it here. If I haven't, my point really being that if People Magazine is putting this guy up to be sexiest man alive, I think that the story that I found about this said that the thing that made him so attractive was his intelligence and his opposition to President Trump. I said to myself, there's no way that he's going to be nominated in a pop culture magazine as being the sexiest man alive if he's not carrying forward the typical pop culture party line. And that remains to be my opinion. Now, during this press availability at the White House yesterday, the president summoned Dr. Fauci up to the podium, and Dr. Fauci very eloquently and very effectively clarified his sentiments, portrayed them in the proper context, and completely gutted this narrative that there is a growing rift within the White House. I think I said it yesterday that it is important that there be a spectrum of differing perspectives on a crisis of this magnitude, because that means that whatever decision is ultimately made is going to be as broadly informed as it can be, and that the decisions made will have the proper dimension and the proper context. So it gratifies me to see a diversity of thought. Now, I also mentioned a moment ago that the president was seated at a large conference table at the White House, surrounded by people who had overcome coronavirus. And I've mentioned on this podcast a number of times that this drug, hydroxychloroquine, and taken in conjunction with Z-Pak or azithromycin, has shown remarkable efficacy in treating coronavirus. Now, one of the people who attended this was, in fact, a politician, and not just a politician, but a Democratic politician, a state representative from Michigan. And her name is Representative Karen Whitsett. And seated next to the president at this meeting, in which the press was allowed to attend, and they broadcast it. I was able to watch the whole thing. So Representative Whitsett said, and I quote, "I just can't say how wonderful it is to see your face, and thank you for everything that you have done. I did not know that saying thank you had a political line. I did not know that. I just thought saying thank you meant thank you. Had you not brought this to the forefront," and by this she refers to hydroxychloroquine, "had you not brought this to the forefront of the HQ, of being able to put this out there, I wouldn't be here today to even have this conversation." I find it encouraging that even people whose political persuasion differs from that of the current administration, that there can be appreciation and a substantive empirical story to bring people hope that there is effective medicinal treatment out there. Even if it hasn't gone through the proper battery of tests, there is treatment out there, and it has been shown numerous times and very broadly to have great potential to treat the sick during this. So I was gratified to see that sort of political and ideological tribalism being abandoned in the spirit of providing people with a sense of hope and a sense of optimism. I found that to be very, very gratifying indeed. Now, while we're on the subject of medications, apparently hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin are now not the only drugs out there that have shown some efficacy. There is a new Gilead remdesivir, I think it's called. It shows up old problems with limited data. I'm not sure I understand that headline, but here's the way the story begins. Gilead Sciences has posted data on 53 severe COVID-19 patients who received remdesivir on a compassionate use basis. More than 2/3 of the patients improved after receiving remdesivir, although lack of a control arm makes it hard to tell what role the antiviral played in the recovery. So there is still research ongoing with this new drug, but it is yet a new medication that's emerged that is showing promise. So I think progress continues to be made. Vaccines look like they're still on the distant horizon. They take at least a year or more to be properly tested, and I think we're going to end up with one of those. But in the short term, I'm encouraged to see that there are developments in the medical field. A new drug, remdesivir, has been shown to be potentially effective in treating people who are sick with coronavirus. So, happy as I am about that, I'm even happier that myself and my friends remain relatively unaffected by this in terms of our health. We're all very affected in the way that the mitigation requirements have impacted our lives. I still have no way of knowing when I'm going to go back to work. It happens that yesterday was the 1 month anniversary of the last time I went to work and earned a day's wages. So I don't know that since my early 20s, before I even drove a car, I don't even know that since my early 20s I've gone this long without working. And I can't wait to get back to being able to take direct control of my life. I'm broadening my horizons when it comes to what exactly I'm going to do to make a living. I'm going to go back to work at my previous job, but I've been able now to evaluate what life looks like in the absence of it. And there are many, many things available to every single one of us. And if nothing else, for our daily habits and routines to have been interrupted, there's always a good side to everything. And in this case, I think we all can perhaps come back to our job saying, yes, I'm grateful for this. Yes, I'm exactly where I need to be. I didn't appreciate it when I was in the thick of it every single day. And I believe that's where I'm going to be when I go back to my job. But I'm also going to have something of an open mind. So I'm thankful for the period of self reflection. And I am optimistic as to what that's going to mean when these restrictions are finally lifted. So with that, I'm going to, 30 minutes almost on the dot of broadcast. I'm satisfied with today and with the information that I have found and with the information I've been able to share. And until tomorrow, then, be good to each other.